This is Gene Krebs.
Hi there. Oh. Whoosh.
And we're high on Ohio.
We're going around this great state. We're talking to people who have an impact, who are making things different here in Ohio. It's my great pleasure to be with Phil DeVol, who is with the Getting Ahead Network. You're an author and consultant, but basically what you're famous for, and you're a native Ohioan, is your work on breaking the poverty cycle. And I don't mean this in the blasphemous sense, but you're working to try to prove Jesus wrong when he said the poor will always be with us, and you're trying to figure out how to go ahead and really eradicate the culture of poverty here in Ohio. But first of all, how'd you fetch up becoming a national recognized expert on this? And so where were you born?
Well, I was born in Mount Vernon.
Really?
Yeah. Didn't live there very long. I mean, our family is made up of a long line of medical missionaries. So I actually grew up in India and didn't come back here until it was time to go to college.
Okay.
So, but Ohio's home.
Okay. And so how'd you fetch up in all this work then?
I ran an addiction treatment program.
Okay.
And ran across Ruby Payne's work.
Okay.
And
we'll back up a little bit for Bobby and Betty Buckeye, who may not know who Ruby Payne is.
Okay.
They're all pausing that right now and looking up, Googling Ruby Payne.
Ruby Payne, right.
P-A-Y-N-E, I believe.
Yes, yes. Ruby wrote a book called A Framework for Understanding Poverty. She wrote it for school folks. Okay. And it has sold 1.5 million copies, which is a lot of exposure. And her trainers have
especially for a wonk-based book.
Yeah. And boy, it took off. And every state, has picked it up and is using that in some way in education. I was in the addiction field, and when I read her book, my first insight was, people who are under-resourced, people in poverty, live in a relationship-based world, because that's how you solve your problems. You may not have money, but you have friends to help you do things.
And you have family. You don't hire a moving company. Everybody pitches in on a Saturday or Memorial Day weekend.
Yeah. So the other half of that is that in the middle class, which runs the institutions of the land, we operate in an achievement-based world. So the agency I ran was all about helping people get sober. And so we were driven towards that. And when I realized that I needed to couple the notion of relationships with achievement, I was able to change things from the way people entered the door, how we treated them when they first came in changed. We, for example, on issues of language, sometimes people in poverty don't have much of the standard American English, and they are speaking casual register and so on. And people would come through our door, and within 5 minutes we were breaking our relationship with them because we had a receptionist that really thought poorly of people that didn't speak proper English. So within minutes, people were being disrespected. So we changed that and many other things, and Ruby found out about it and asked what we were doing. We told her, and she said, "Why don't you help me write a book?" And so Terry Ducey Smith and I wrote Bridges Out of Poverty with her.
What's been the impact of Bridges Out of Poverty?
Bridges. Well, we started out just training around
You have a copy
Ohio.
of it here with you?
I have a book that came up afterwards on that, Bridges to Sustainable Communities.
Okay.
This tells a story about what happened after Bridges.
Okay, but please go back to Bridges Out of Poverty here, though.
Yeah, Terry and I began training around Ohio, and and we thought we were just helping agencies like our own, not necessarily in the addiction field, but any agency that works with people in poverty. And so that's what we did. But what we found out was that people were taking our ideas and innovating with them. Mm-hmm. So one of the first was a plastics firm in Grand Rapids, Michigan, called Cascade Engineering.
Okay.
A wonderful organization, based on Covey's work and so on. And they were having terrible retention rates with their new hires from poverty. So they took our ideas. Terry and I went up there and trained even before the Bridges book was printed. And they used our ideas, and they improved their retention rate from 29% to 69% in just a matter of months by using our ideas and theirs. And then I realized that people take our ideas, and when they take ownership of them, they begin to innovate with them. And wonderful things begin to happen. So different sectors began using our work. So business was the first.
For workforce retention, it sounds like.
Exactly. Hospitals are using it, and the courts are using it, and so every sector that interacts with people that are under-resourced start using our work.
What year did you publish this book?
It came out in 2000.
Okay. I see. That's also when I left the General Assembly. I assume, and having done a little bit of the background, I came across Ruby Payne's work a decade ago. Now people have basically, in case the audience is wondering, a previous person I've interviewed, former Secretary of State, Jennifer Bruner, is a true fan of yours, and she's the one who said, you've got to interview Phil DeVol. So, what has I assume the General Assembly and all subsequent gubernatorial administrations have been beating your door down wanting to know, how do we go ahead? Because it sounds like what you're heading towards here is one of those key things. You're jumping silos in public policy. Mm-hmm. You understand that if you can have an impact on this policy, this problem over here, it has all these helpful impacts on all of these. So you fix addiction, you fix some workforce issues, you fix some problems with the courts being burdened and all that. What's been their response?
Well, we haven't had a statewide response or much of a response from legislators.
Okay.
The people who respond to our work the quickest, I think, aside from the organizations that use the work, are communities, counties and cities.
But not the state as a whole.
Except for Oklahoma.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah. So usually,
which is a deep red state here, folks. This
right.
is not Connecticut or Massachusetts or Taxachusetts. This is a deep red state.
Yeah. It's interesting that very progressive places like Boulder, Colorado, and Fort Collins, or Howard County, Maryland, very progressive kind of places love our work, and very conservative places do too.
So we're too moderate to embrace this, is what you're saying.
I think it's just a matter of who can act on it.
Okay.
And I think that what people who hear our work and who are attracted to it in local communities suddenly realize that here I am in Ashtabula or Akron or Dayton, and I like these ideas, and the other people that in the other sectors that are running organizations, they like it too. If we came together and collaborated, we could have a bigger impact on poverty issues and improve our own outcomes.
Yeah.
So they want to do it. And you can act locally because you know people, you have influence, you know the history, and you can do relevant work.
This is an organic process.
Yeah, messy.
Basically, I recently interviewed Bill Kitson, who runs United Way out of Greater Cleveland. And what he said, we have banned helicopters. We used to own a lot of helicopters. So we would just fly in, drop down, and say, here's your solutions, and then get the helicopter and get back up in the sky and leave.
Yep.
And what you're saying, this has to be done at a organic grassroots.
Yeah, it has to
Where have
be
you
owned
failed?
locally.
Where have you failed?
There have been mistakes.
Okay.
But the trouble with bridges is, I guess you would say, actually it's the magic of bridges. Once you change the way you think about poverty, and you take on what we call the bridges language or the lens, once you see poverty differently, you can never go back.
All right, so
you're stuck.
So for Bobby and Betty Buckeye out there, okay, now you've done it for Sam and Sally Sooner down in Oklahoma. But up here, walk us through exactly what would you do in a community, region, county, state, whatever. How would you approach this?
Well, when people hear about our work, there's trainers out there all over the place now. We have what we call certified trainers. So there must be over 2,000 bridges trainers across the country. And so people hear these ideas, and they begin to think differently. And then they go, well, how do we start? What do we do? And one of the fastest ways we found out to go from 0 to 60 in building an initiative in your community is to have a 3-hour overview for systems thinkers of people that have had a taste of bridges already and sort of like it. We always work through attraction. If you like it, come hear more. A 3-hour overview, and in the afternoon, turn it over to the local folks and say, we'll be here to be a resource to you and answer questions about how things are done in other places and give you ideas. But you have to take charge of planning from here on. So it's attraction and shift the ownership locally. And it's not like a helicopter dropping things in. It's people beginning to take ownership right now and knowing that they can make it relevant to themselves.
Is it cost heavy?
In our work, there's sort of a menu. There isn't a contract for X number of years of support from our company. Ruby's company is called AHA Process. And there's consultants that can come in at different places to help out. But you choose the kind of the level of help and the number of trainers and the consultants you want to come in, and that's usually at the beginning. And then as you begin to have your own certified trainers and you begin to become the experts, then you find out that you can do this.
Can we eradicate poverty? I mean, right now, as we're filming this, we're now celebrating or mourning the 50th anniversary of the War on Poverty. And it did cut the poverty rate in America by about half.
Yes.
But we also spent, trillions of dollars on it? And so the question is, did we get our bang for our buck, from some folks? And other folks say, well, we just didn't spend enough. Some folks say, well, we wasted it. No, we didn't, So the question is for you is what you're doing by changing the culture of poverty. Basically, once you change the culture of poverty, you don't have poor people anymore, according to your work thing, correct? Can you actually eradicate poverty? Or make it de minimis in a community?
I use the phrase, we want to build communities where everybody can live well.
Okay.
And I think that's more realistic. I think there will always be some people that, for the lack of resources or significant issues in their lives, illness or the like, that there will always be people that we need to support and have a safety net for.
Okay.
But we can do a lot about helping people live better, where everyone can live well.
Well, can you walk us through, how this actually? So, the community contacts you and everything. How you talk about your success up in Michigan. How does that actually work, though, in the field?
In the field?
In the field. That's
Sure.
that's what I think people want to know about. Is how does this actually work in the field? You walk in and say, "Hi, don't do drugs. I'm Nancy Reagan," and of course we know that doesn't work. By the way, I should say to folks that over the years, a lot of ideas people have had, like scared straight, where you took kids into prisons. Actually, statistics show it made them more likely to end up committing crimes and spending time in prisons if they'd never been inside a prison before. But go ahead.
Well, I learned a lot from the addiction field, because that's has a lot to do with how people change, and people have a hard time changing when they have an addiction.
Okay.
So I think the whole notion of what's your theory of change or how does this work, and in our case, I think probably one of the most fundamental things, two things I should say. One is you have to engage people in poverty in the conversation. Because the plans that get made most of the time to deal with poverty or anything else are done without people in poverty at the table. So
That's
true. The very people that
you go to any conference that you and I go to all the time, it looks like a whole lot of folks just like us.
Exactly.
White guys in suits and white guys in tweed coats. Okay.
That's true.
You're missing your patches, I see, on the elbows, which is supposed to have
should
for all
put those
this.
on.
Yeah.
Well, I think that I was in this work starting in the late 1990s. By 2004, I had figured out that we had to be engaged with people in poverty. So I wrote this book, which is for people who are in poverty, called Getting Ahead in a Just Getting By World.
Okay.
And this allows our communities to engage people who are in poverty in the conversation. So 12 people at a time go through this with a facilitator. The facilitator can never tell you what to do.
Okay.
never articulate for you what they think your motivation should be, and never have an agenda for what you should do when you're done with this.
Okay.
And what happens is that when people have a safe place where they can have analyze the impact that poverty has on them and their community, what tends to happen is they decide to take charge of their lives.
Okay.
So at the individual level, we find that people are ready to do something, and that is to analyze their resources and decide which ones they're going to build a plan for it, and get a support team. That engages the people in the institutions. And when they start beginning to, for their purposes, use these ideas to help their clients do better, you now engage individuals in poverty and the institutions. Then when the institutions come together to collaborate to be more effective, you've engaged the entire community.
Okay.
So we're not just after the culture of poverty. We're after bringing all three classes to the table.
Those three classes again are?
Poverty, middle class, and wealth.
Okay. The ruling elite,
Yes.
who run everything, the middle class, the bourgeois, who effectively do whatever the ruling elite's paying them to do.
Yes, and?
The poverty, who are people who are just getting the subsidies so they don't riot in the streets.
And when they can get together with a common language,
Okay.
which is the bridges language, when they come together to solve things, you're not just talking about people in poverty changing, you're talking about, I often say this, people in poverty probably do need to change some of the things they're doing, but no more than people running the institutions or the communities, no more than people that in middle class or wealth. And when people get that idea, they suddenly go like, wow, now we can have a conversation around the table. Take the information that we're getting from people that went through this. They know what the poverty issues are in the community, and they know what the barriers are as they begin to transition out. That important information is local, because poverty in Youngstown is different from poverty in Columbus.
And poverty is different in Meigs County.
Right. So that brings us all into the game and working on it. It's just not waiting on people in poverty to make changes.
All right, so let me throw this at you. For the first 45 years of my life, I lived next door to people I'm one of those very rare members of the upper bourgeois. And for the first 45 years of my life, I lived right next door to people who were on food stamps, who had no indoor plumbing, and skinned their raccoons on the living room floor while watching John Wayne movies. Okay? And I will tell you, I know these people quite well. We always got along very well, but their poverty was because of a series of choices. Bad choices.
Sure.
So do you create then, do you have these people self-actualize and realize they've been making a series of bad choices then?
I think that's what happens in getting ahead.
Okay.
I think when people start looking at what is in their life, the very first module, we start out by saying, what's poverty like in your community? And they're the experts, and they tell us. And we do a number of activities in there about what's your debt-to-income ratio, what percent of your income do you spend on housing and things like that. And we turn it from a safe conversation about the community to a more difficult conversation about myself. And so for the first half of this book, people are doing the hard work of looking into their own lives, the themes of their lives. And then they decide, as we begin to bring in new information, understanding how the middle class works, understanding how people in wealth work, understanding the causes of poverty, learning what poverty is. We define it as 11 resources. The more you talk about these new ideas that are all relevant to them, they begin to form a new future story.
Okay.
So in getting ahead, you analyze what is, but you're working towards a future
So
story.
they have a new self-actualized vision of what their life should be like.
Could be, yes.
Should be, not or could be.
Well, both. For them, we let them articulate that.
Okay.
And out of that, people have these huge insights.
Okay, let's talk numbers then. What's your success rate? Can you measure success? And what do you use to measure success by? People getting off of food stamps and not coming back?
There's all kinds of measures. So one is to measure what's called agency, or taking charge of your life.
Okay.
And if people come out of getting ahead with a plan that is really conceived well, and they know that by working on it they can do better, that they are motivated and have a track to go down. There's ways of measuring that. The next thing that we would measure is there's 11 resources that make up the quality of life. It isn't just money.
Right.
So if you can raise the level of those resources, then you're changing the quality of your life. So that's 2.
Okay.
So then you'd want to evaluate what changes, so you can attribute this to where it needs to be attributed. Do the institutions change the way they do business, or are they still doing the same old thing?
Now, you've brought up an interesting thing, which is on Ike Eisenhower, when he was leaving the presidency, he warned the country about the military-industrial complex. There's also the, we'll call it the do-gooder industrial complex. A whole lot of associations, organizations, government entities, non-government organizations, who are dedicated, supposedly, for getting rid of poverty. And if you ask them point blank, can you tell me exactly, statistically, if you've done any good? Well, no, I can't tell you that.
Yeah.
So how do they take this then? Because you could get status quo. You're pushing back against the status quo and the entrenched.
That's a really good question. I think one of the tools, we've developed a number of tools that communities use now.
Okay.
And one of them is how to tell the difference between resources that are about getting ahead and resources that are about getting by.
Okay.
Okay. So when you're describing people who have become accustomed to the benefits and so on, when they go through getting ahead and they analyze these, they analyze it according to what resources am I using that help me get ahead and which ones are just keeping my head above water and I'm just maintained in poverty. Okay. So when you're talking about the status quo, you're talking about keeping people where they are, not really helping them get
So
out.
you're bypassing the whole do-gooder institutional structure.
That's right. There's a problem with that.
And do they sell little Phil DeVol voodoo dolls at their conferences to stick pins in you then? Because you're undercutting their whole reason to be.
I understand that, but most of the people who work in this field and in those fields want to do well.
Okay.
And what I think the whole nation is looking for right now is a way to deal with this, a way to find a balance between a safety net and supporting people who have an initiative and want to move forward. And shifting the funding is one of the hardest things to do, from providing programs that keep people, maintain people in programs that follow them and with financial support as they're gaining stability. So let me give you a couple of examples.
Okay.
At the individual level, a getting by resource is metropolitan housing, subsidized housing.
Okay.
You wait for years to get on it because you want stable housing, and you get through the waiting list, and now you've got a stable house, and that's great. That's really important. That's still a getting by resource. Habitat for Humanity is a getting ahead resource because you're building assets, okay? So people differentiate between those. So
And in my discussions with African Americans, they say this is one of the biggest things holding back as a group, the African American community, is the lack of home ownership, lack of assets they can then leave to their children, so they get off to that little bump.
Exactly.
Start.
Yeah, we know how wealth is created.
Yeah.
It's created over generations.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what they're saying. So there's a simple example. But when someone who's in that subsidized housing goes through this is a story of a woman who went through this. She's from South Bend, Indiana. She goes, it's the scariest thing is to step from a shaky safety net to a shaky ladder. If I choose, as I was encouraged to by my friends in Getting Ahead, my co-investigators, if I choose to get off that safety net and step on a ladder to a job that pays so much I'll lose my subsidized housing, that's what happens. It's the cliff effects. You lose the housing if you earn too much.
Okay.
So she goes, I step on a shaky ladder. It's shaky because I don't know the job will be there a year from now.
Okay.
And I'm going to lose the stable housing. So she has to have the courage to be able to step off the safety net into another space. And she does it.
Now, what's been the response, for example, of the foundations?
Well, let me just take you another step.
Okay.
So if the institutions begin to analyze, just like people in poverty do by going through Getting Ahead, the institutions begin to go like, how are we delivering resources? Are we just bringing resources to people, or are we helping people build them? So they analyze it. That's when you get to the funders. because United Ways and foundations are now the people who are coming to us now. When we first started doing this work, it was people in the typical funding streams, federal, state money. They were the ones that were having us come to town. Now it's foundations, United Ways, and now banks begin to call us in.
Banks?
Banks.
Why banks?
Because the idea here is now we're talking about how do you fund things so you can help people transition, how to build resources. And they've been seeing the same phenomenon.
Banks help them manage their resources. They make money then. When poor people, when they move up the food chain,
Yep.
all of a sudden now the banks have more clients and they can, frankly, make money.
Yes.
It was, I forget who made this quote one time to me. They said, "We will always have the poor until the rich figure out how to make a dime off of them. And as soon as business figures out how to become rich off the poor, we'll stop having poor because the banks can all figure out how to become rich off of the poor."
Well, payday lenders are often run by banks. And they've been getting rich off of payday
They've been getting
lending.
rich off the poor.
The banks that work with us are not predators.
Okay.
I mean,
Can you give a plug for a couple of the banks you work with then?
I can mention one.
All right.
It started in Martinsville, Indiana,
Okay.
Morgan County. And they heard about bridges, and they decided that there was so much poverty in their community, and their banking problems were getting bad. There were a whole lot of unbanked people, and even the middle class weren't taking out loans because they were in so much stress.
Okay.
So they heard about bridges, and they said to the community, "We'll have bridges come in and get you started, but we're only here as a catalyst. We won't do anything more with it." So we went, and that was a year ago, and now they're truly invested. And on the 9th, which is
Friday.
I'm going to be meeting with the Indiana Bankers Association.
Really?
Yes, and a hot process, and one of our sites in South Bend, Indiana, which has done terrific work with banks. We're going to meet with the association and propose to them, and they want this proposal, to set up pilot sites in Indiana with their Bankers Association, maybe 10 sites, and get the ball rolling that way and to see how that works in all of their communities.
Have you talked here to the Ohio Bankers League and Mike Edelman, who runs that?
Well, why don't you introduce us?
I'll be happy to.
Okay.
Look, I mean, I say this all the time. There are 5,000 people who run Ohio.
Okay.
I have about half of them in my Rolodex.
Okay.
The executive director of the Center for Community Solutions, John Bagala, has the other half in his Rolodex. Okay. If I don't know them, John does.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's talk.
And so, all right. I'd be happy to do that.
There's another national bank.
And by the way, the audience just saw, this is how things really work. It's very Victorian, yet it requires these letters of introduction.
Yes, absolutely. This is how people in wealth work. It's not what you do, it's who you know and your connections.
Yeah.
So this makes it really exciting. There's another national bank I cannot name that has figured out the same thing in Martinsville, is that to start with, their own employees are struggling. Their retention rates for their tellers is terrible, and the turnover cost is killing them. So if
I never would have seen that.
If you get trained in bridges and you take some strategies that were developed in Vermont and a couple of other places, you can stabilize the lives of your employees. So the banks will benefit immediately by doing this. Now, if you take that model, and then the banks offer that model to employers that have retention rate problems and say, we can help stabilize. If you start doing the bridges work and understand how poverty really works in a community, then they can begin to open the doors of their employers in their community and offer them something concrete that is also fair to the employees.
All right, let me ask you this question. This looks like an ordinary ink pen. It's not. It's my magic wand.
Yeah.
I'll wave it over you. Okay. You now get to require something in the state of Ohio. We're Ohio-centric, so that's all we care about. You could require it of the governor, the General Assembly, the Supreme Court will back me up on this. You could require it of the bankers. You could require the Ohio Manufacturers Association, the Chamber of Commerce, whoever. What would you like to see them all do?
I I really...
Your best fantasy. You're driving
yeah.
into work every day and you're going, wow, if I could just do this one thing,
Yeah.
what would you have them do?
I wouldn't mandate anything.
Okay.
What I would ask is that all of those groups that you just heard give us a fair hearing on the ideas.
Okay. That's it?
It has to come from attraction.
Okay.
You can't mandate this stuff.
Just all you want them to do is sit down and
Yeah.
have a cup of coffee with
Have a
you.
fair hearing, yeah.
Just a cup
Yeah.
of coffee and
Yeah.
go over all this.
Yeah. You can't mandate stuff. You know, I worked in Morrow County for
Yeah.
19 years running an addiction place.
Uh-huh.
And during those years, we saw different things get mandated. And they came down sometimes by legislation and sometimes just through, real influence. As in, if you don't do this and you're not playing, we'll remember it, right? So we've seen many sort of national programs that say, let's move the dial on this, let's move the dial on that. And it's best when people become attracted to it. And
So the myth you're going to bust here for us is mandating this stuff doesn't always necessarily work then.
no, I don't think so. And it certainly doesn't work for people in poverty.
Yeah.
So when people come into getting ahead, they're never mandated.
Okay.
In fact, they're paid.
All right. So you're basically you're doing the Lord's work, so to speak. You come from a strong missionary background. I still sense that in you. What keeps you up at night as you go through all this?
Destabilizing people's lives.
How so?
If you just, and from this day forward, you're going to have this bugging you to death.
Okay.
Just pay attention to every bit of news that comes down every day that some policy is made or decision is made that destabilizes the lives of the people that are working.
Okay.
Okay. 76% of faculty in our universities are now adjunct.
Yes.
They're not full employees.
Right.
They have to scramble to work. For them, it's hard to put together enough stability for the next year or two to actually get a loan to buy a house. That's destabilizing at that level. When you take the pensions away from people that worked for a long time in the auto industry, you're destabilizing their lives.
Talking about Delco over here in Dayton.
Yes.
And I should say for the camera, we're filming this in Yellow Springs.
Okay.
Yes, but go ahead. That's why I say over there in Dayton. So go ahead.
So you work your way down the food chain of jobs, and there's more temp jobs, there's more part-time jobs, there are more contractual workers. There are people that work in a temp position for years without ever becoming a full-time employee. What this means is that people are in a precarious place. And I'm talking from the upper middle class all the way down.
Right.
A very precarious place where it's hard for you to make plans for the next couple of years and have them be within reach. There's just not enough stability. So if you destabilize the workforce the way that it is now for people who are, say, working in a big box store at a fast food restaurant, and they have 30 hours, but they want to be able to shift your hours so that you're always available to them. It means you can't have a second job because they want you for a certain number of hours.
Right.
All of those things are about destabilizing employment. And if that goes on, it is already the middle class is at a place where in 3 decades, they're at the same median family income. This is making it worse. And for everyone below that, people who are working the working class sort of jobs are slipping into situational poverty. That's why there's so many people using SNAP, which is old food stamps. And then you get to people who are in poverty. And here we are trying to get people out of poverty when more people are coming into it. So that's what keeps me up at night, is that it is a relentless downward pressure on wages. And it happens every day. Just read the paper, listen to the news, and it's one story after another. Now, those things are, the latest thing I heard today was people are not skilled enough in these positions that are franchise restaurants and so on. And the franchise mothership doesn't insist that the people that use their franchises pay a good wage. And the idea is that they're so unskilled that these are unskilled jobs. They shouldn't be paid much. Well, here's the irony. If you're working at a big box store and you're not making a living wage, right? Mm-hmm. You must be skilled enough because you're making huge money for the owners of the companies and for the stockholders. You have the skills to do that. Why aren't those skills enough to pay you well? So that idea that people are somehow undeserving, even though they're working a hard time all day, that sort of thing is what keeps me up at night.
Okay.
I actually know that people in poverty are problem solvers.
Okay.
And everything we do in Bridges is based on that premise. When your car breaks down and you're middle class, you call AAA. They come get you and your car. They take you to work and your car to the shop, and at the end of the day, you're reunited. You're in poverty, you don't have AAA. You have Uncle Ray, right? He comes along, puts a chain on your sorry car, drags it back to your place. Then you have to find someone with the parts and someone who's the mechanic to put it together for you. At the end of the day, you solved your problem, but it took you all day.
Yeah.
People are solving problems like that all the time. They spend all day, every day, fixing all the things that can go wrong. Housing issues, child care issues, health issues, transportation issues.
So there are a whole lot of MacGyvers,
Yeah.
to use the old TV show,
Yeah.
and if we can just get them somehow up out of that strata, we could unleash upon this country a whole nother realm of innovation and entrepreneurship.
It's
The question
wasted
is,
talent.
The question is, because by the way, you're talking about this, and this has happened to me because I've not always looked and smelled this good. I just simply find an old coat hanger in the car and 2 quarters and a pair of vice grips, and I can fix darn near anything. I mean,
Baling twine and duct tape. Right?
Yeah, well, actually, no one has baling twine like we used to.
Yeah.
But, instead now they use baling. That's another story. But in any case. All right, so so for Bobby Betty Buckeye out there, you have a couple of books you want to recommend everybody read, and that is, first of all, it's Getting Ahead.
Yeah, this is something that you do in a group.
Okay.
The beauty of this is that you go through it with a facilitator, and I'll say this has turned out to be absolutely.
So I couldn't just pick that up on Amazon and just read it.
You could.
And I could, but
Yep.
would I within 5 years be elbowing aside Bill Gates for the richest man in the world? Probably not, though.
I have heard of people that have just done this on their own.
Okay.
But what really works best is that half of the learning is in the content of the book, and the other half is in the conversation.
All right, let me ask you this
so
question.
People in poverty talking to each other across diversity, because there's diversity everywhere. The wisdom of people older and younger, men and women, people of different races, sitting around the table talking about these issues, turns into a learning. People learn how to learn, is that they take charge.
Okay.
And that's the exciting part of this.
Okay. And the other book you'd recommend for?
Bridges to Sustainable Communities is a collection of papers that gives our core ideas and also says, here's how you organize in your community.
Okay.
And so.
All right. Well, anything else you'd like to add here today for us?
Well, one more thing. I think that people are attracted to the ideas. And
Right.
We have what we call the triple lens. It means that everything is addressed through these things. The individual lens, the institutional lens, and the community lens.
Okay.
And that leads to policy.
Okay.
Okay, so you get Judge Robb from Columbiana County. The Supreme Court of Ohio had a 4-year, 4-phase project to introduce bridges.
Really?
And they said to the people that came, and 80 of them got trained as trainers in Ohio.
Judges?
Judges included. I think there were 12 judges in that group. And Judge Robb and Judge Ballinger from Marion, the idea was that if you like this kind of work, okay, begin to use it in your court. And if in your community there's already what we call a Bridges Steering Committee, or that collaborative I told you about, if there's one, join it. And if there isn't one, form it.
Okay.
So these 2 judges formed steering committees for bridges in their 2 counties. And you talk about policies, Judge Robb made 9 policy changes in her court. A couple of them that are quickest to tell made all the difference. One of them was middle-class offenders could afford an ankle bracelet, electronic monitoring, so they could stay home with their kids and help with their homework, and they could go to work and not lose their job.
Right.
Low-income offenders couldn't afford the ankle bracelet.
You have to pay for it? I did not know that.
Yeah, yeah. So then you sit in jail.
I'm so bourgeois.
Yeah, you wouldn't know.
Yeah, how would I know? I only know one guy. Two guys actually spent time in prison. All right, which probably makes me unusual out there. But yeah, go ahead. Just so you know.
Yeah. So the guy who's doesn't have the money, he has to go to jail. So he doesn't keep his job and he can't help his kids with his homework.
Right.
So she goes to the county commissioners in Columbiana County and goes, "If you give me $10,000, I'll save you money." So she went to the provider of those ankle bracelets, beat them down a bit on their price, and saved the county in less than a year $65,000.
Whoa! Out of jail costs.
Out of jail costs. The other thing she did, when she found out, we call it the tyranny of the moment. Okay. People in poverty are living in the tyranny of the moment because everything's breaking down around them. They have to fix it right now. Unstable. So when you say to someone whose car doesn't always start and so on and so forth, I want you to see the probation officer a week from Friday at 2 o'clock, and if you don't make it, I'm going to issue a bench warrant. You issue a lot of bench warrants because the car broke down, the kid got sick, and so many different things get in the way. When she found out about the tyranny of the moment and how many agencies people go to, she changed her instructions, and she said, I want you to go to the probation officer by Friday, next Friday, by 2 o'clock, but sometime between now and then you can stop in anytime you want as long as you're willing to wait till he's free. And it wiped out the bench warrants. Because it wasn't defiance of the order. It wasn't that the people didn't want to be...
They live in lives of chaos.
Yeah, so...
I know. I lived next door to these people, and trust me, they had lives of chaos.
And when you have a chance to put words to it, then people go like, I don't want to live in the tyranny of the moment anymore. I want to gain stability. And when you have a judge who says, I want you to be stable too. I would do things that will stabilize your life. So in the employers that use our work, they're simply shifting it from, you're an unskilled worker, and I just wish you'd just do your job, to maybe there's ways I can support you. And if I can help stabilize your world, that'll improve my retention rate, and it'll pay off.
Well, let me put it to you this way: there's, my friends to the right talk a lot about makers and takers.
Yeah.
And what you're kind of getting towards here is, the way I would put it says that we have people right now who consume GDP, gross domestic product, and those who produce GDP, gross domestic product. What you're really talking about here is that with a little bit more judicial application of some of the GDP in some training, and doesn't have to be public sector, it can be private sector, you can get these people from consuming GDP to at least being neutral on GDP to producing GDP themselves. And you can do so within a 3-year time span, if I'm hearing you correctly. 2-year time span? 5 years?
If you have it working at all three of those levels plus policy, a community can get things going. Muskogee, Oklahoma, used a city foundation grant. They heard of it in a 45-minute talk from one person. They heard about this work and they said, we want to invest in it. So, I went there and did that morning session. In the afternoon, we planned. They put $250,000 a year for 5 years into it. And they have expanded, the different sectors that use it in Muskogee so that it's the common language, it's critical mass on bridges constructs in that city. And they just passed legislation a week ago.
In Oklahoma?
In Muskogee. The city council said that henceforth, any policy we pass will be done that has an impact on people that are under-resourced. We will have them at the table to be informing us on what the impact will be and what exactly we should be doing. That is huge.
Which, in your opinion, because in Ohio, everybody says, well, we compare everything, okay?
Yeah.
Who's doing it best, if you had to pick your favorite child, which community, county, region, structure, state is doing it the best? So in other words, Bobby and Betty Buckeye are watching this,
Yep.
and they're going to say, I want to call a person to see how it's worked in their community. Mm-hmm. So which community is your most shining example of the perfect realization of the concepts and precepts that Ruby Payne suggested and you've adapted now to this particular structure?
Well, first of all, there's 41 communities in Ohio using our work.
41?
Yeah. And there's 35 states that are using it.
I didn't find that on your website.
No.
By the way, what is your website again?
It's gettingahead.com.
Gettingaheadnetwork.com. So it's www.gettingaheadnetwork.com.
That's right.
So, but in any case,
yeah, so there's I counted them up just for you. There's 41 communities in Ohio doing it. And there's 21 different sectors that are using it.
But who's doing it the best?
Well, I'm getting there. I just wanted to honor Ohio for what it's done because we took the lead.
Okay.
So there's really good things happening, and people learn from Judge Robb. They learn from Marion, Ohio.
Okay.
Marion, Ohio has done terrific work.
Michael Sage out of Butler County, I think. But go ahead.
Don't know him, but it could be.
Okay.
I think there's lots of contenders, and we have an annual meeting, an annual conference, and the people who speak at our conference are the people who do the work.
Okay.
So those of us that wrote the books, we aren't speaking at the conference. We might do a little session here or there, but the breakout sessions are all being run by people that use our work.
When is your next statewide conference?
A national conference.
National
yeah,
conference.
October 6th and 7th.
Where?
In Nashville.
In Nashville.
Yeah.
And so if somebody wanted to go to that, they go to your website, and they would see about how to go to that conference.
Yes.
Or they could simply hunt you down.
And
somewhere in either Morrow County or Greene County. You seem to be splitting your time between the two.
There's wonderful sites in many places. Schenectady, New York has great stuff going on. Each one has its own sort of specialty. South Bend, Indiana has been at this a long time.
My question's not fair, I know that, but I get to ask the questions.
You do, yeah. I know what happens, though. When I say, go to this place, they'll get inundated with so many calls that they won't get their work done.
So basically, I guess at the end of the day, go to your conference, October 6th and 7th, Nashville, Tennessee.
Yeah.
Great ribs, by the way.
Yes.
Good music.
Good music.
Great ribs, and it's called gettingaheadnetwork.com.
Yeah. There's another website, ahaprocess.com. AHAprocess.com. And that's another one.
All right.
So, learn more about it and, see if you like the work, the ideas. And then if you like it, then we invite you to start innovating with it. And we'll help you all we can. And then all these communities out there, they'll help you too.
Basically, I guess...
It's this huge movement.
And I'll tell you, for the cynics out there, I get a sense from you too is that, okay, fine, you peddle the books, but once it hits the community, you're not making vast sums of money from this then.
No.
You're just basically, if you want to buy the book, that's great, and here it is. And how much does that book cost? The big purple book?
This is, I think, $16.
Wow, I mean, obviously you're not getting rich off of this, and the fact that you weren't even sure how much your book costs, I think, says a lot to Bobby and Betty about.
I don't know.
This is not a monetary exercise for you.
Some people say he's a lousy businessman, but no, it is the most exciting thing because this is where there's two recent studies that came out with the McClatchy newspaper and with another one I can't remember just now. They came out in the early part of February.
Okay.
And basically what they're saying is that if you take hard Republicans, soft Republicans, independents, soft Democrats, and hard Democrats, and you ask them what they really think about people in poverty or what should be done, the agreement is amazing.
Okay.
We get so bought into the left and right are, completely either or. And when you're talking talk radio and cable television, you're right. I mean, that's a small fraction.
That's the echo chamber.
And yes, and when you get into the communities, and look, I've been in all these places. And I meet people that are very conservative, and I meet people who are very liberal, and I can tell you that they basically agree on the American idea that you should have a fair shot.
Right.
And so there's this, and most of them agree that people in poverty are decent people trying to do the best they can. So you take that research and you take my experience in these places, and you're going like, there is hope. In our communities, that's why people like our work. I took a look at the causes of poverty and found it to fall into 4 clusters. One is individual choice and behavior.
Okay.
That get you in trouble.
Okay.
At the other end of the continuum is political economic structures. Okay. So here's globalization, deindustrialization, downward pressure on wages. Okay. In between, there's research on what is available in your community. You know, is your community one that got slaughtered by '08? Or did you get through it fairly easily? Mm-hmm. Is the way to get out of poverty in your town to get out of town, like the Rust Belt cities? Mm-hmm. Or can you actually make a living there?
Okay.
So your county counts, your community counts. The 4th sector is exploitation. How many forms of exploitation are there that are taking the last dime out of the poorest people in our communities?
Okay.
So we look at that research and we go like, it isn't either or. There's good research about the individual. You had Charles Murray on. Mm-hmm. That's where he comes from. Mm-hmm. The new book, Scarcity, mm-hmm. the new book, Capital, they're coming from over here. It's not either or, it's both and. Okay. Poverty is caused by the choices of the poor. It is caused by political economic structures and everything in between. So when you get to a community and they hear that, and they're going, wow, you mean you think there's good research in what we're doing? Yes, there is. But you have to open up to the whole thing. And if you want to have a comprehensive approach to poverty, you know, this is part of it. You have to address all the causes of poverty. You can't just default to blaming the people in poverty or blaming the government.
Okay.
You have to do it all.
Okay. Well.
Okay.
This has been Gene Krebs, and on behalf of the Center for Community Solutions, we've been going around this great state. We've been talking to people who are making a difference. Obviously, Phil DeVol is making a difference. You got 41 communities here in Ohio already adopting your work. More to come, I believe. Sure. After seeing this video, I'm sitting here and I'm frankly going, how can I get him to come to my home county and talk about this? And when we leave here, I'm going to steal these 2 books from you, and I'm going to give them to the 30th floor, okay, which is code for the governor's office. Sure. And say, here, you may want to read these. There may be some things in here you may want to take a look at. Okay, and you got my email. And I got your email. Good deal. And also, I'll be in contact with the Ohio Bankers League. Okay. And we'll schedule a coffee. I'm already had the date in my head. I want to talk to you. All right. Yeah, I'm thinking May 21st. So we'll see about this. Okay. All right. Sounds good. Well, thanks. This has been Gene Krebs. Thank you very much for tuning in.
For more about the Center for Community Solutions or their publications, please visit www.communitysolutions.com.